I'll admit it, there are certain teams that I go to great lengths to mock and make fun of and make jokes at their expense, and the reason for that is because they've earned that. They deserve it. And one of those organizations that clearly fits into that hole for me is the Oakland Raiders. I mean, they've been a joke of an organization for over a decade. Only a blind, black hole sheep fanboy of the team would sit there and argue that anything other than that was the case. I mean, 12 seasons that they've made the playoffs, they've mostly been bad, and they haven't gotten a whole lot better, and still don't have a lot of reasons to believe that they're going to get a whole lot better. I mean, you look at 2014, they started off 0-10. I mean, at one point in time, we were talking about whether or not they were even going to win a game. Now, they rallied a little bit behind interim head coach Tony Sparano. They won 3 of their last 6 games, but you can sit there and talk about that's reason for hope, that's reason for optimism. Yeah, they went 500 over the last 6 games, but they had to do that just to finish 3-13. It's just still a really, really bad football team, still one of the worst and least talented organizations in all of the National Football League. Just bad. And a big reason for that is so often the case with the teams that pick in the top 5 or top 10 consistently of the NFL draft every year is because of their failures in the NFL draft. Now, occasionally they found those guys that have worked out, guys like Steven Wisniewski, C.O. Moore, going back to 2010, guys like Lamar Houston and Jared Veld here. But there's just been so many misses. And even looking at the 2010 draft, their first-round pick was Rolando McClain. And remember, at the time, that was a pick that most people were praising. People were really praising the Raiders for that 2010 draft. But McClain didn't work out for Oakland. Valdir and Houston are both gone. Bruce Campbell was a bust, their 4th-round pick. They got nothing, basically, out of that entire 2010 draft class. But what's even more ridiculous for this Oakland Raiders organization was trading a first-round pick for Richard Seymour, a guy on the wrong side of 30. Trading a first-round pick in one draft and a second-round pick in the next draft to get a guy like Carson Palmer, also, again, on the wrong side of 30. A guy that played 1 season for your team you gave up a first- and second-round pick for because you're fucking stupid. They gave up multiple high premium draft picks that they probably would have blown any damn ways, frankly, in order to get veteran players on the wrong side of 30 that would be the type of moves that you would maybe make if you thought you were 1 or 2 pieces away from contending from a championship. Instead, these guys were 1 or 2 pieces away from winning 6 or 7 or maybe 8 games in a season. I mean, just ridiculous and just terrible. And then you even look at like the 2013 draft. There's still question marks there about first-round pick DJ Hayden, second-round pick Menelik Watson. Lots of misses, lots of question marks, very few hits. Although, if you're a Raiders fan, maybe a reason for a little more hope is what looks like the success of this 2014 draft class. It looks like it's going to be one of the better Raiders draft classes we've seen in some time. They played it smart and played it safe with that 5th overall pick. Didn't overthink things, just took Khalil Mack. And they came back in round 2 and took Derek Carr. 3rd round, Gabe Jackson. 4th round, you're talking about Justin Ellis. I mean, it was a really good draft class for the Oakland Raiders. It really, truly was. And that's the type of draft class that can start to turn the fortunes of an organization. It doesn't happen overnight always, and doesn't happen immediately, especially for a team that is in such a bad position, it has been for so long, and buried themselves in such a deep hole like the Oakland Raiders. But that's a draft class that can start to affect some positive change. And you look at this offseason, the Raiders, again, just like last year, had a ton of salary cap space, so they had a ton of money to spend, even just to get up to the minimum salary that they had to spend for salary cap purposes. And, they spent their money. I thought they spent their money better this offseason than they did last offseason. Yeah, I thought they overspent for Rodney Hudson, especially when they already had Steven Wisniewski. I don't understand why they didn't just re-sign him. I don't see where there was that much of a difference between him and Hudson. But I like some of the other signings that they brought in, guys like Malcolm Smith and Dan Williams and Curtis Lofton. Even Gamble picked signing like a Trent Richardson. I mean, these are guys with talent, but guys that for different reasons maybe didn't work out at their previous stops or kind of fell off towards the tail end. These are guys they didn't invest a ton of money into, didn't bury themselves into long-term cap problems to get most of these guys. So if a couple of them pan out, it's even that much better. I mean, you would hope that 1 or 2 of them even pans out because, again, the Raiders need them badly too because they have drafted so poorly over the past 5 years. And we'll see what happens ultimately. When it comes to draft needs for the Oakland Raiders, it's very simple this year. You took Derek Carr in the 2nd round. As a result, he's now the face of the franchise. He might not be the franchise's best player. I most certainly don't think that's the case. I think that's Khalil Mack. But with that said, though, he's the quarterback. And in this league, you either have a quarterback or you don't. I'm not fully sold yet that the Raiders do have a quarterback in Derek Carr, but I'm also not fully sold that they don't have a quarterback in Derek Carr. As a result, you must find a way to help him. You must position yourselves to be able to give your young quarterback every opportunity he can to develop into a franchise quarterback. And you look at their needs in the draft, they mostly come, frankly, on the offensive side of the ball. They need help everywhere. They need help on the wide receiver core badly. I mean, they have a bunch of number 2s, more so number 3 and number 4 type of NFL wide receivers. They don't have a number 1. They need help in the backfield, period. You know, you're counting on Latavius Murray? I don't think so. They need a 3-down bell cow type of back. They need help at tight end, somebody else to go along with Michael Rivera. What's wrong with having 2 tight ends that can play? They need help on the offensive line, in particular, I think, at left tackle long-term to eventually replace Donald Penn. They could use some help on the interior of that line, going opposite of Rodney Hudson and also a guy like Gabe Jackson. They need help everywhere on the offensive side of the ball. Not to say they don't have needs on the defensive side of the ball, because, again, when you're 3-13, you pretty much have needs everywhere. But at this point in time, based off of the way the draft has worked out, the fact that the Raiders probably aren't in a position to have to make a decision for a Mariota or a Winston, it looks like they're going to be rolling with Derek Carr, at least for the short term and potentially the long term. In that case, this does, to me, guide their draft needs in a certain direction. While some people will sit there and talk about the philosophy of the Raiders and it's just say best player available, and a lot of people, especially Raiders fans, that seem to fall in love with the concept of taking Leonard Williams, number 4, because they think he's going to be a real difference maker. At the end of the day, your identity as an organization is going to be Derek Carr. And as a result, your philosophy in the draft must revolve around 3 things. Help Derek Carr, and help Derek Carr, period. If the Oakland Raiders spend the 4th overall pick on a guy like Dante Fowler, who I really like, or a Leonard Williams, who I'm so on, they're idiots. And the reason I say that is because how are those guys really going to help Derek Carr? They're not. They're not going to put him in better situations to succeed. They're not going to give him more help on the offensive side of the ball. When you sit there and talk about best player available, let me put it to you this way. Let's say out of these 4 players, you have Dante Fowler, Leonard Williams, Kevin White, and Amari Cooper. Let's say you have Dante Fowler rated the highest. You have Leonard Williams and Kevin White graded the same. Amari Cooper's right there. Do you really not take a Kevin White, let's say, because you have Leonard Williams graded the same or maybe just a notch above, or Dante Fowler just a notch above? No, I think that's ridiculous. Because, again, in this particular case, it's based off of the situation. To me, it's about best available player at a position of need. And while most certainly guys like Dante Fowler and Leonard Williams would fill positions of needs, I'm not sold completely on Leonard Williams' fit in Jack Del Rio's defense in Oakland. I do think Dante Fowler would fit quite magnificently. At the end of the day, they're not as big of needs as the offensive side of the ball is. I think the Oakland Raiders are completely and totally insane if they don't invest the 4th overall pick on either Kevin White or Amari Cooper. Whichever wide receiver they think is better. In my opinion, I think it's Kevin White, obviously. But if they think Amari Cooper is the best option at 4, that's the guy that they must take. And I'm most certainly not going to knock them for that, other than maybe saying maybe you should have taken Kevin White. Unless Kevin White was already off the board, then that's a different story. The Raiders must find, first and foremost, a number 1 wide receiver in this draft. And the best way to do that is by selecting one at number 4. And there are wide receivers worth taking with the 4th overall pick in this draft. Then they must focus on providing other help for Derek Carr. It's that simple. You talk about defense, but at the end of the day, you brought in a guy like Jack Del Rio. You would hope to fix that defense and help improve that defense, especially with young talent in place like Khalil Mack and C.O. Moore, guys like Justin Ellis, and maybe a guy like DJ Hayden you can get more out of. That's what you bring in that type of coach for. It should be his job to fix the defense, not have to sit there and invest an entire draft this year into the defensive side of the ball when your help is clearly needed on the offensive side of the ball. Listen, you're playing in a division with the Denver Broncos and the San Diego Chargers. You need to be able to score some points. Furthermore, from the Oakland Raiders standpoint, you know you're not going to be that great next year. You're not going to be a playoff team next year. But when you look at the long-term outlook for this division, it looks relatively rosy for the Oakland Raiders. What this organization should be doing right now from a philosophical standpoint is doing everything they can to position themselves to be the guys that run the show in that division, maybe 2016 or especially 2017 and beyond. Peyton Manning's probably playing his last season in the NFL, let alone for the Denver Broncos. Phillip Rivers could potentially be out of San Diego after next season. Hell, he could be out of there before this season. Who knows? But even if he's there another couple of years, you know, the Chargers are kind of the middle-of-the-road team. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, Alex Smith Smith is who he is. He's not going to get a whole lot better. And the Chiefs themselves pretty much are who they are. Again, a kind of middle-of-the-road, middle-of-the-pack team. This is the time now for the Oakland Raiders to make their hay. This is the time now for the Oakland Raiders to build themselves up. This is the time now for the Oakland Raiders to become that team that in 2 seasons or 3 seasons becomes the creme de la creme, the gold standard of the AFC West. And if they want to do that, then they must help Derek Carr. Period. Imagine even if they double dip at wide receiver in the first 2 rounds of this 2015 NFL draft. How much better is that going to make Derek Carr? How much more complete of a football team is that going to make the Oakland Raiders? How much more seriously are you going to have to take the Oakland Raiders? Or if they take a Kevin White at number 4 or Amari Cooper at number 4 and then they take a running back at round 2 or an offensive tackle in round 2 and a running back at round 3. To me, in my opinion, almost every single pick of this draft should be spent on the offensive side of the ball for the Oakland Raiders because they have needs everywhere. They have needs everywhere. And at the end of the day, the identity, again, of that organization is going to be Derek Carr. So you must help Derek Carr, you must help Derek Carr, and you must fucking help Derek Carr. Taking a Leonard Williams, a Dante Fowler, or anybody else on the defensive side of the ball with that 4th overall pick is ridiculous. And it's going to be key to watch the Oakland Raiders with that 4th overall pick because that's going to give you a real clue of whether or not the people in charge, namely Mark Davis and Reggie McKenzie, have a clue or not. If they take Kevin White or Amari Cooper with the 4th overall pick in the 2015 NFL draft, then maybe it's time for Oakland Raiders fans to start to believe in the long-term vision, to start to believe that things will eventually look up, start to believe that maybe someday this team can actually run that division. But if they sit there and take a Leonard Williams number 4 overall, then it's just more of the same. And while he'll be somewhat of a value pick in some people's minds, and he'll be a good productive player at the NFL level for the next decade or so, he's not going to catch passes from Derek Carr. He's not going to help protect Derek Carr. He's not going to open things up offensively for Derek Carr in the passing game by providing a threat to run. At the end of the day, the Raiders must hit on this draft just like they did for the most part with the 2014 draft because the opportunity is there soon to be the kings of the AFC West. And if they want to do that, Derek Carr is going to have to become a franchise guy. The only chance he has to become a franchise guy is to surround him with help, which is why this entire draft pretty much should be devoted to the offensive side of the ball, most especially and importantly of all, that 4th overall selection.